Forward to the cloud. Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot daf Yud Dalid. We are on the last line of Yud Gimel Amud Bet. I'm going to share my screen and with the summary, and let's get going. So we have been discussing the extent to which a woman's claim explaining her pregnancy or lack of a hymen is believed, and we've seen the following debate. Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer say basically we believe the woman. Pretty much in all of the different cases that we've seen, we have believed her. Rabbi Yeshua says no, we can't, we don't know, and so as a result, because we don't know, we can't believe her. We need witnesses, we need evidence. We only can believe based on evidence. And so today we begin with a case in which there is no disagreement between the bride and groom, and we pick up with the bottom line of Yud Gimel Amud Bet. And so we say, Hahu arus va'arusato. So there was a man who had done Kedushin with a woman. They had begun the process of getting married, but they had not done Nisuin yet. And the Asula Kamei de Rav, and they came in front of Rav Yosef, and they came in front of Rav Yosef. He Amra, and of course, as we're going to see, she is pregnant. He Amra Mine, she says that it is from him, that she's pregnant as a result of her soon-to-be husband. V'hu Amar in Minai, he says, yes, it is from me. Now Rashi will seems to be suggesting that he is sure that it is from him, but Tosfos says no, it just means that he did have relations and it could be from him. So those are important differences, because the question is, in a typical situation where he just admits having marital relations, do we necessarily believe? But in any event, Amar Rav Yosef says, L'mayin nechoshle. So what do we worry about? What is there to be concerned about? Chada, meaning that there is nothing to be concerned about, meaning that she and the child should be okay. Because chada deha kamod. One, we have the husband admitting that he's the father, and v'od ha Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel halacha k'Rabban Gamliel. Moreover, we have Shmuel, as reported by Rav Yehuda, Shmuel saying that the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. So Amar le Abaye asks a question about this, because we have another statement of Shmuel that that seems to suggest something different. Amar le Abaye uvaha kilo moda michsha Rabban Gamliel. 1 second, didn't the husband? Didn't the Rabban Gamliel admit that? Wasn't it dependent on the husband admitting? Meaning, you just said that there were two reasons to rely on to believe her story when she says that that her soon-to-be husband is the father. But in fact, there's only one reason, meaning it's only because the father admits that he is the father that everything is okay. Because Rabban Gamliel said that V'ha'amar le Shmuel Rav Yehuda, Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, Shinina, sharp one, halacha k'Rabban Gamliel. The halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. Va'at lo tavid uvda ad de'ika rov ksheir mitzvah. However, you shouldn't act that way unless the majority of potential mates is kosher. So if we remember back to the case where the woman was violated, if she was violated in the city and most of the residents of the city are Jewish, well, then we can say that based on the concept of rov, that we will be able to rely on it must be a Jew, and so as a result, she'll remain kosher to marry a Kohen. But if in fact it was a situation where most of the men are not Jewish, well, then we would not rely on Rabban Gamliel. And even if she says that the man was this certain Kohen, meaning that it was a certain person who had good lineage, we won't necessarily believe her. That's what it seems like Rabban Gamliel would be saying. And in this case, the only person who could have relations with her and not cause her to become prohibited is the one that she's going to marry. If she has marital relations with anyone else, a Jew, a non-Jew, doesn't make a difference who it is. Even a Kohen doesn't make a difference who it is, because she's an Arusa. She's already engaged. She's already had that first step of marriage when she becomes prohibited to everybody else. And so as a result, it must be that Rabban Gamliel, so it can't be, Rav Yosef, your statement that it is enough to the fact that that the law is that we believe her based on Rabban Gamliel doesn't seem to be true. So Rav Yosef says, no, you're misunderstanding when Shmuel said that the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, but we only rely on him when the majority of people who could have relations with the woman are kosher. No, that is not. Although that is all true, l'tamich tikshilach he gufa. 1 second. Then the statement of Shmuel himself would be very odd, because he says halacha va'at lo ta'avid uvda, because he's saying that the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, but that you shouldn't actually follow him. That doesn't make sense. Elamai islach l'meimar. What is he really trying to say? Rather, halachatchila hadiavad. That when he says that we look at to see whether a majority are fit, that is if we are dealing with a lachatchila situation. If she comes to us and asks, can I have marital relations with this person? Then we would say, okay, well, tell us whether, where you were raped and who the majority is, and then we'll be able to answer that question. But this case of a woman who came to me with her pregnant, and she and her fiance, who had engaged in kedushin, both agree that he is the father. That is definitely a diavad case. That is a bidiavad case. V'hanami kediavad dami. This case is like one that is bidiavad, right? Because as Rashi says in the first of the narrow lines, Shanis Abra, she's already pregnant. Va'ata baluf sol ha'ubar usra al ha'arus, and now you're going to come and make her prohibited to her husband and make the child prohibited. De'im ein atam amina, because if you don't believe her, atam motzi ami bala, you're going to have to send her away from her husband. So as a result, we're going to want to believe her. And so now we've again come to the conclusion that in fact, as we wanted and as we expected and as we've seen, that in fact the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. There's a caveat to it in that we don't, if it's a lechatchila case, we try to be strict, but b'diavad, it is clear that the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. Okay, so now in our Mishnah, we said that Rabbi Yoshua did not believe the woman, and the Gemara now questions how Rabbi Yoshua could hold this position. So Rami le Abaye l'Rabba. So Abaye posed the question and seems to highlight a contradiction between two different rulings of Rabbi Yoshua. Because Umi Amar Rabbi Yoshua Eina Ne'emanes, could Rabbi Yoshua really say that the woman's not believed? Uraminhu, we have another teaching, and this is from a Mishnah in Edios. Heyid Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. So we have the same Rabbi Yoshua, and he is testifying along with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira that what was the halacha al amanas isa with respect to a literally an almana of dough. But we're going to understand it. I'm going to give you the explanation, and we will see that we will explain it this way shortly. This is talking about a woman whose husband was a potential halal. A halal is an invalid kohen, a kohen who is the product of, for example, a divorcee and a kohen. That will actually make the children invalid. And so as a result, we're talking about somebody who isn't a definite halal, is only a possible halal. And we'll discuss the three possibilities in a moment. So right now, again, we've got this definite halal, and we got this possible halal, and he is married to this woman, and then he dies, so she is now a widow. And what do we say? Shehi sheira l'chuna. That even though ordinarily, if a halal has relations with a woman, that woman is not allowed to marry a Kohen. In this instance, we will allow her to marry a Kohen because his status was only an uncertain halal. It was in doubt, exactly. And so, what does this all imply about Rabbi Yehoshua? Rabbi Yehoshua seems to be saying that we follow her original status. She had before she married this guy, she had a chazaka, as we said, as we explained just before the class opened, a chezkas aguf, a chazaka of her body that in fact she was allowed to marry a Kohen. And we're not going to let an uncertainty take this woman out of the category of the chezkas aguf, of her being allowed to marry a Kohen. Well, that causes us a problem. Because what did Rabbi Yehoshua say in all of the cases, in all the Mishnayos that we've seen? In all of these cases, he has said that we do not believe the woman. And yet, in all of these cases, or many of these cases, she has a chezkas haguf. She has a chazaka originally of being a valid, of being a woman who is able to marry a Kohen, a woman who is able to remain with her husband. So now Rabbah explains back to Abaye. So Amarle Hachi Hashta. Are you really making that kind of comparison? Those cases are not comparable. Hasam Isha Nises Bodekas Venises, right? The point is that the woman who is getting married is going to investigate, and only after she does an investigation will she marry the guy. And so in our situation where she is the widow of a possible halal, so we will rely on the fact that she will do some investigation and say that we're going to keep her in her chazaka of being kosher to marry a Kohen. But hacha isha mizana bodekes umizana, does she engaged in an extramarital relationship? And so because it was an extramarital relationship that involves some aspect of illicitness, so we're going to say to her that you can't rely on your chezkas haguf because you may not have done any proper investigation with respect to the person that you had relations to. So as a result, that's why these cases are different. So we understand why Rabbi Yehoshua says it is a problem in the cases that we've seen in our Mishnayos, and why in the case where she is a widow to a possible halal, that's why we will believe her.
Who's right, who's wrong?
Who's right and who's wrong. So we've now shown that Rabbi Yehoshua is right in both cases. That when she is when she's married, so she does the right investigation, and we can allow her to continue in her status of being permitted to marry a Kohen. But when she has an affair, that's not what she should be doing, and so as a result, we're going to say that she's not allowed to marry a Kohen. So that's the distinction. Yes. So yes, that was yesterday. Yes, she got the money yesterday. Okay. So Amarava. So now we're going to analyze this question that Abaye asked, and note that just as you asked a question with respect to Rabbi Yehoshua, frankly, you could have asked a question with respect to Rabbi Gamliel. So Amar Rava de Rabbi Yehoshua ad Rabbi Yehoshua kasha. If you're going to say that there's a question between one Rabbi Yehoshua statement and the other statements of Rabbi Yehoshua, so de Rabbanan Gamliel ad Rabbi Gamliel lo kasha, you're not going to ask about one Rabbi Gamliel to another. Because Vahakatani Seifa, at the end of that Mishnah in Adios, what does it tell us that Rabbi Gamliel said? Amar lahen Rabbi Gamliel said to them, Kabalnu eduschem. We accept your testimony that, again, Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira had testified about the handling of certain other cases. And Rabbi Gamliel says, we accept your testimony. However, about ma nasa, but what can we do? Shahare Gazar Rabbi Yochanan Zakai Shalola Hoshiv Beis Din al Kach. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai said we should not establish a Beis Din to publicize this ruling, because Shakonim Shomim Lachem L'Rachek, because Kohanim will listen when it comes to telling you what not to do. If you prohibit something, the Kohanim will listen because they want to be very careful about their genealogy. But they won't use a leniency to bring a person close. So as a result, what Rabbi Gamliel is saying is that for all intents and purposes, we're not going to actually believe the woman. We're going to treat her, or it's really not believing the woman because everybody agrees on the facts, but we're not going to allow her to maintain her chezkas aguf, her chazaka of being able to marry a Kohen, her status of being able to marry a Kohen. We're not going to allow her to do it. And so doesn't that contradict with all the other statements of Rabbi Gamliel, who says that we allow her to maintain her status when she makes a statement that is consistent with that status holding? So Ella Amar Rava then explains and says, just as there was no question on Rabbi Yeshua, there's no question on Rabbi Gamliel, because the Rabbi Gamliel lo kasha, there's really no question, because Hasam Bari Hacha Shema. Because in all of our cases of our Mishnayos, the woman knows the facts. She knows with whom she had relations, and she is expressing a certain position about with whom she had relations. And so as a result, we can rely on her statement. But here, she has no definitive statement, because fundamentally, the halal that we're talking about is an uncertain halal. We do not know whether or not he is a halal. He might be a halal, but he might not be. So as a result, we're going to say that that's why in one case Rabbi Gamliel believes her, and in the other case he does not allow her to maintain her status. And Rabbi Yoshua, Nami lo kasha. And similarly, we can say with respect to Rabbi Yoshua that there's also no contradiction. Why? Hasam chad sveika. In all of our Mishnayos, there's just one uncertainty. The uncertainty is, did she really have, because we don't know, she may be testifying to the fact, but we don't, but she has an incentive to testify to something that's not true. So we don't have objective evidence of what happened to her. And so we have one doubt. With whom did she have marital relations? But when it comes to this potential halal, tres sveke, there are two doubts. So what is this case of the safek halal? So we'll go back. Let's go back to it, and I'll do it outside and to tell you the three different opinions. So opinion number one of Rashi is to tell us the basic case of uncertainty of halal. Now remember, a halal is a situation where a divorcee marries a definitive halal is a divorcee marries a kohen, and their child is called a halal, an invalid kohen. And so what's the situation of uncertainty? It's where the husband throws a get to his wife, and we don't know. The rule is that if a man, which a man should never do this, but if a man were to throw the divorce decree to his wife and it lands closer to her, she's divorced. If it lands closer to him, she's not yet divorced. In this case, it landed right in the middle, and we're not sure whether it landed closer to him or to her. And then you know what happens 2 seconds later? The husband drops dead. And so now he can't finalize the divorce. And we know that she's permitted to marry other people because either she's a divorcee or she's a widow. But the problem is now she married, exactly, which one is the truth? Is she a divorcee or is she a widow? So now if she marries a Kohen, that their child will be a Safek Halal. Now, the issue is that we just said that we're dealing with a spek sveka situation. So one explanation of Rashi is to say that it's not actually two different uncertainties, but now we're just talking about the next generation, and because of we're talking about the next generation, so as a result, that creates two uncertainties. The Rashi's second explanation that does have two uncertainties and is in the name of Rav Yosef Tovi Lame is that now the possibly divorced wife marries a Kohen within 3 months of her being with her first husband. So now we have a second uncertainty. Is the child that comes from that relationship the son of the first of the deceased husband, in which case he may not even be a Kohen, but whatever he is definitely a kosher person? Or is he the son of the second person, the second one? And even if he's the son of the second one, is the second one the product of the result of a marriage with a divorcee, or is it the marriage with a widow? And if it's a marriage with a widow, he remains a kosher Kohen. If it's a marriage with a divorcee, he's an unkosher Kohen. And so as a result, Rabbi Yoshua says, in that case of those double uncertainties, we're going to say that we're going to allow the widow who marries this man who's got the double uncertainty to marry a Kohen afterwards. Okay. And Rabbi Gamliel says no. Now, Tosos adds a different possibility. He doesn't like that the usage of the language of Isa, of dough, because he wants there to be a whole mix-up. And so as a result, he suggests that the story is as follows. That or they suggest that Tosos suggests that in fact we know that there was somebody who was a Safek Halal. Again, a case of throwing the get, and we don't know whether it was closer to him or to her. And now that person marries a Kohen, and the widow slash divorcee marries a Kohen. They have a child, and now that child marries into a family, a big family. And now we have somebody, but we no longer, it's now many generations later, and we don't remember, we know that who the clan is, but it's a big family, and we don't know, was this person the father, the ancestor, direct ancestor, or not the direct ancestor? How big was the family? I don't know, but it was big enough to be confusing. So as a result, Tosos says that's the situation where we're talking about. And what are the two uncertainties? The first uncertainty is maybe the halal isn't actually the person who is, maybe the person who is in front of us is not actually a descendant of the potential halal. And the second uncertainty is, even if they are the descendant of the potential halal, maybe that potential halal is not really a halal. So that's the two uncertainties. But that's the story. So now we've come up with the two different uncertainties, and we've explained it. So now Hilkach LaRabban Gamliel. So based on all of this, we can now say for Rabban Gamliel, Alim Le Bari, how strong for him is a claim of certainty, that in our cases of our Mishnayos, where there was only one uncertainty, meaning we don't know who she had relations with, that we're going to allow her certainty, her certain claim, to overcome even a single doubt. The Kilei Shema, Nami Pasel. And look how weak a claim of maybe is, that even though there are two uncertainties, we're not going to allow her to marry a Kohen. And on the other hand, Rabbi Yoshua, alem lechad sveka dafil bivari nami puzzle. Look how strong a single suffix is, that it overcomes a certain claim where she says for sure she knows who she had relations with, and yet we're going to say that she is unfit. The kille sveka dafil b'shema nami makshir. And look how weak a sveka is, that even when the claim against it is only a maybe claim, meaning maybe this guy's not a halal, that's all I have to say. We're going to allow the woman to marry a Kohen. Okay, so now then, we taught this halacha with respect to this case of Almanas Isa, a widow of dough. And so, but we haven't really explained, I mean, we explained it and we detailed it, but now we're going to teach a brisa that helps us understand it. Now, the good news is that I've explained it already. We're talking about somebody who is a potential halal. The bad news is that if you were to try to explain it based on this brisa, it would be very difficult to understand. So you'll see what I'm saying right now. So Tana Rabbana, we learned in a brisa, Ezahi Almanas Isa. Who is this category of Almanas Isa? So Kol she'ein bo lo mishum mamzerut, below mishum nesinut, below mishum avdei malachim. That we're talking about somebody. Now, first of all, we have to read in that we're talking about an uncertainty. That we're talking about somebody we're not talking about somebody who's a suffix mamzer. We're not talking about somebody who's a suffix nesin. Those are the people who try to become Jewish, but in the end didn't really join. And so as a result, their status is uncertain, and they also engage in relations so so as a result, we treat them effectively as non-members of the congregation, and so they can't marry in. And, or the slave of a king. And I think it's the idea here is just, why it could be any slave, but the slave of a king, the slaves of Shlomo HaMelech were known to have become wealthy, and so as a result, they are the presumed spouse in this instance. But the bottom line is we're not talking about any of those three categories. Of course, what's left? The implication is what's left is the suffix halal category. So Rabbi Meir says, Shamati kol she'ein ba echad mikol eila. I've heard that somebody who has an uncertainty which isn't any of these three uncertainties, masiyan l'chahuna, we allow that person, when they become a widow, to marry a Kohen. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer Mishum Rabbi Meir, and then Rabbi Shimon says, adds a further qualification, saying Rabbi Meir did not say what you just said. Rabbi Meir said, or what the Brisa said. Rabbi Meir said, but rather this is what Rabbi Meir said. V'chein haya Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh Omer tidvarav, and Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh also agreed to what I'm about to say. Rabbi Meir said, and what was that? Ezohi almanas isa. What is the person who's an almanas isa? Kol shenitma ba suffix halal. Anyone who became mixed up with a suffix halal. So and Rash and Tosfos, the reason that he didn't like Rashi's explanations of the Sfek, etc., is in part because of this language of nitma, that mixed up suggests that she herself isn't directly connected to the uncertainty, but we don't know whether she's connected to the uncertainty. So that's why Tosfos likes their answer. Okay, but in any event, Makirin Yisrael Mamzerim Shebenehem. We recognize the Mamzerin among Israel, but Ein Makirin Chalalim Shebenehem. But we don't recognize the Chalalim among them. So lots of questions about this price. So we're going to raise three different questions because there's a lot to unpack in what we've just said. Question number one. Amarmar ezuhi almanas isa kol she'ein bablo mishum mamzerut, velo mishum nesinut, velo mishum ade malachim. Right? Who is this uncertain status that we're going to allow to the widow of an uncertain status that we're going to allow to marry a Kohen? It's one who doesn't have any of these three uncertainties. So hachalal kasher. So who is it that does have this? We're talking about somebody who's an uncertain halal. That in that situation, that must be who's allowed to marry the Kohen. Well, Maishna Hanach Doraisa. What's the difference between the laws of Mamzerut, Nitzinut, and Eved, where all those three disqualifications are biblical disqualifications, and Halal Nami Doraisa, the disqualification of being in connection, being married to a halal is also biblical. So why when with uncertainty when it comes to the first three are we going to be strict, and uncertainty when it comes to the halal we're going to be lenient? So that's question number one. Question number two, Visu Amar Rabbi Meir Shamati Kol She'ein Bav Echad Mikol Elu Mesiin L'Chahuna. I heard that anybody who doesn't have any of these disqualifications is allowed to marry a Kohen. Well, Hainu Tanakama. What's the difference between Rabbi Meir, the first Rabbi Meir statement, and the Tanakama? Visu, and the third question, Rabbi Shimon Elazar, I'm sure Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer Mishum Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Meir, V'chein haya Rabbi Yeshimon Menasya Omer Kedvav, and Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya said like him, Ezuhi Almanas Isa. Who is this? Kol shenitmas ba safek halal. That anybody who we're talking about somebody who is a doubtful halal. And then makirin Yisrael mamzerin shebenehem ve'ein makirin halalan shebenehem. And Israel recognizes the mamzerim, but not the halalim. V'ha'amrat reisha halal kasher. One second, that would imply that we're concerned that because you don't recognize the halalim, so as a result, we should be worried about a halal marrying a Kohen, and we should be strict. But earlier, the statement of Rabbi Meir and of the Tanakama is lenient. So what is it? What are we coming to say in this third statement? How are we supposed to understand this third statement? So now we have the answer. Rabbi Yochanan is going to explain the three different positions by pivoting the debate about a particular case. So Rabbi Yochanan, Mamzer Tzoveyach v'chalal shosek ika benayhu. That we're talking about what happens when you accuse somebody of being one of these statuses, and either they protest or they don't protest. So if we have somebody that you call a mamzer and they protest, and you call them a halal and they remain silent. So Tanakama, the first opinion in our brisa, savar kol psul de karile v'shasik pasul, that anytime you call somebody a name and the person doesn't respond, it's an indication that they recognize that that name applies to them. And so as a result, if you call somebody a mamzer and they don't say anything, it means they're a mamzer. If you call them a halal and they don't say anything, it means they're a halal. So v'hagi kamar Tanakama, and this is what the Tanakama is saying. Ezohi almanas isa kol she'ein ba lo shasuk mamzeris v'lo shasuk nesinas v'lo shasuk abdei melachim v'lo shasuk halal. You need to have it's somebody who doesn't have silence with any of these accusations. Meaning,
is this like in court or just to their face or in public? Or, I mean, this is like, what are the implications here? I call some.
Certainly the symbol read is in public but I mean, we can try to put it in a court setting to try and understand it. But that's that to understand it better. But the implication is that is what happens in public when this person is accused. So, but I think it does make it a little simpler to understand if we put it in the court setting. But
But I mean, what would the case be? I mean, an
oh, the
adjudication
case is
of
exactly
debt?
what we're talking about, right? So the case is, I mean, we're dealing with underlying rumors, right? So an accusation. So we're dealing
Like
with a situation.
declaratory judgment or something? I mean,
Well, the woman wants to know, can she marry a Kohen,
so
right? So,
she's coming to court to get, I mean, it's not a case is usually
oh,
between
you're
two
right. I mean,
people.
on that regard, it must not be a case because they got married, right? So you're absolutely right. It must be in public because if it were because he's not around to be in a court case because he died, right? So that we're talking about a situation where she's now a widow, and witnesses come forward and say, "I accuse this guy of being a halal," and he didn't respond. That must be what we're talking about. So and yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that I don't think that the halacha is going to follow that approach, but in any event, it's a, um, well, actually, maybe it does. Seems like the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah certainly puts the aleph on kol pasuk the karolei v'shasik puzzle, that anytime you accuse somebody of some psul and they're quiet, that they are considered puzzle. So we do have the shtiga kahoda dami, but that the silence is assent. So in any event, so the point is that the first opinion says that any accusation, even a halal accusation, if the person is silent, we're going to assume that they're a halal. So the case of a the case of an I apologize. The case of a what's the word? Almanas Isa. The case of an Almanas Isa is where the person was not silent. And so on that, Rabbi Meir says back to the Tanakama, no, only those first three categories of mamzer, nesinus, and being a slave, that's where a silence will be an admission, because aval, because those three are pretty egregious. About shasuk halal kasher. But if a person is accused of being a halal, we will allow them to remain fit. Why? Because at the end of the day, who really cares whether you're called a halal? Because the man who's a halal can marry whomever he wants. There's no limitation on whom he could marry. Now, the person that he marries will not be able, if they get divorced or he dies, will not be able to marry a Kohen. But people assume that they're going to stay married for the rest of their lives, and so as a result, it won't matter to her presumably either. So as a result, but the bottom line for Sherer, he doesn't care because he can marry whomever he wants. So v'ka'amar le Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar l'tana kama the Rabbi Meir, and so Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says to the first person who was quoting the ruling of Rabbi Meir, that says, no, Ishmielach the Machsha Rabbi Meir b'shasika. If you heard that Rabbi Meir was quiet about silence, lo de karole chalal v'shasik. It wasn't about a case where you accused the man of being a halal and he was quiet. It was a different case. El de karole mamzer v'shasik. Rather, it's a case where the person was called a mamzer and was quiet. And why do we say that a mamzer, if you accuse a person of being a mamzer and the person is quiet, we allow the person to stay in their kosher status? Because v'hai d'shasik saver mamzer kala islay. Because everybody knows who the mamzerim are in the community. And so as a result, they know if I'm not known to be a mamzer, I'm not worried that you're calling me a mamzer is going to change anything. Aval mamzer v'tzoveach, but if he is accused of being a mamzer and he protests, chalal b'shosek, or he is or he is accused of being a halal, and then he is accused of being a halal, and he is quiet. Well, in that situation, pasul. Then we will assume that he is pasul. V'hai de ishtik saver mistaye the lo mapdile mikahal, because he's protesting about the mamzer. Because in fact, if they do an investigation, they'll see he's not a mamzer. But he's not protesting about the halal because he doesn't want them to investigate him and treat him as a halal. Because right now he is an uncertain halal, and so he doesn't want any extra investigation. So Tani Chada. So okay. So now we've explained. So now first of all, how have we explained
He's
all
an
the
uncertain halal. They're not going to find out anything more than he's an uncertain halal, right? They won't be able to prove that he's a definite halal, right?
That is true, because because of the uncertainty. But I guess because he doesn't want, to be a certain uncertain halal. But clearly he doesn't want them investigate. The explanation here is he doesn't want them investigating what his status is. But the bottom line is, what do we see from all this? So with respect to question number one, so question number two and question number three is, what's the difference between the Rabbi Meir and the Tanakama, and what's Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar saying? So now we understand, right? The Tanakama says that what matters is, does the person protest? Rabbi Meir allows the person to protest, doesn't require the person to protest about a halal. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, no, he specifically got to protest about a halal. He doesn't really need to protest about a mamzer, because the mamzer is the one case where everybody knows the status. So those are the three different opinions. And so now we've explained how they're all different. And that's the answer to questions 2 and 3. But what about question number 1? Why is a halal treated differently from the first 3 categories? And the answer is because, at least for Rabbi Meir, who treats it differently, and he's the only one who treats it, the middle Meir, Rabbi Meir, the first time we reference Rabbi Meir, that's different because a halal is not as big an insult. Calling somebody a halal, especially a suffix halal, is not a big insult. So now the Gemara is going to ask and pose a contradiction, because we have 2 different statements that seem to contradict one another. So Tani Chada, Rabbi Yossi, Omer, Shasuk, Mamzer, Kasher, Shasuk, Chalal, Pasol. We have a statement that says where Rabbi Yossi says that if you're quiet about a mamzer, you are kosher. But if you're quiet about being halal, then you're pasol. Betanya iduk shasuk halal kasher shasuk mamzer pasol. And in the other one, we have another brisa where the statement is that if you're quiet about a halal, you're fit and you're kosher to marry a kohen. And if you're shasuk about a mamzer, then you're pasol. So which is it? You got it in 2 different directions. And of course, lo kasha hatanakama aliba de Rabbi Meir. So when we said the second of the statements, shasuk halal kasher sakshus mamzer pasol, that was our original Rabbi Meir statement. That if you're quiet about the allegation of a halal, it's because it's not such a big insult. But if you're quiet about a mamzer, well, that's a pretty big insult, and then we're going to be worried. But and the second statement where it was said, where it was the other statement where it was shasuk mamzer kasher shasuk halal pasol, that is had the Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar aliba de Rabbi Meir. That was Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar according to Rabbi Meir. So we'll conclude by just kicking off our next Mishnah, and with that we will finish for the day. So
kind of funny, because like mamzer has become like a curse word, like, oh, what a mamzer that guy is, So,
correct.
If he doesn't protest, then he is, or something. Or
well, I mean, the way I take all of this is, and that would be consistent with sort of the way we live our lives today, is that in the times where people would not just throw around mamzer accusations and they meant it literally, well, then we would have to be worried about it. But what we can understand, especially from Rebbe Meir, is that what the statement oh, that guy's such a mamzer, is not intended to be a serious statement. And so as a result, it should not be viewed as an accusation. And as a result, what anybody responds to it doesn't really matter. So the question is sort of, again, is the statement being made as a true accusation, or is it being thrown around as an insult? And if it's just being thrown around as an insult, I don't think that would result in a change of any person's status. Okay, so now our next Mishnah addresses a woman who was violated by an unknown man when she went to get water from a spring. So Amar Rabbi Yossi, Masa betinokes sheyarda l'malos mayim min ha'ayin v'ne'ensa. So again, this young girl goes to get water, and she is violated, and we don't know who it was. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Im rov anshe ha'ir masiin l'chahuna, harezo tinasei l'chahuna. So if in fact most of the people in town are able to marry a Kohen, well then we will allow her to marry a Kohen. So we'll pick up with the Gemara analyzing this Mishnah, God willing, tomorrow. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Who was right or who was wrong?
Who was right and who was wrong? Right now, I think we're going to say Rabban Gamliel was right, and that we're going to believe the woman. So the man doesn't have a short claim. He doesn't know the facts. And so since the woman knows the facts, we're going to trust her. That's what I say. So I think that's who's right. Okay?
We'll find out this week.
Yeah, we're going to find out more. We'll learn more about it tomorrow. To be continued. Every day it's to be continued. Okay? All right. See y'all.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Everybody. Have a good day.
I can't say. Well, hold on just a second.